these crazy requests are really funny because it sounds impossible, but you're really just the one right person away from figuring it out. It's kind of wild to think about it, that for most of your problems in your life, you're one conversation away from figuring it out. And if you can just tell every single person you know what you're trying to look for, we just have like 3, 4, 5 degrees of separation between most of the things that we want in life.
Welcome to a Way of Thinking podcast. This podcast is dedicated to lighting the way towards greater inner peace and purpose. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Way of Thinking. I'm your host, Jessica Huang. And in this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with artist, activist, and photographer Benjamin Von Wong. And Benjamin is best known for creating large-scale objects of curiosity. And in this episode, we talk about his experience from going from being a mining engineer to becoming a viral artist. He reflects on how creating bigger and bigger stunts led him to start questioning what is enough, and ultimately going in search of more meaning and purpose. This led him to creating more social impact projects, like an upcoming art installation at the global treaty negotiations in Korea. Benjamin shares his strategies on leveraging relationships, time management, and most importantly, community. We also discuss navigating societal pressures and family dynamics on the quest for what brings you purpose. So keep tuning in to hear my conversation with Benjamin. And before we get started, let me make one quick announcement. So I am currently running a giveaway. So if you sign up for my upcoming newsletter between now and the end of July, you will be entered to win a free coaching session with me. And in this newsletter, you're going to get lots of insights and updates, and make sure you never miss an episode of A Way of Thinking podcast. And I want to make a quick note. In the last episode, it was very funny because I was talking about consistency and the importance of being perfectly imperfect. And I accidentally said the wrong date. So I actually said August 31st was the end of the giveaway, but it is going to be July 31st. So this is me definitely embracing being perfectly imperfect. But yes, the giveaway will be running through the end of July, so definitely hit up the show notes and click the link to sign up for my email list, and you will be entered to win the free coaching session. So thank you so much for tuning in, and here, without further ado, is my conversation with Benjamin Von Wong. So welcome to the show, Benjamin.
Thanks for having me. Hello, hello.
So, Benjamin, it was so great meeting you a few weeks ago, actually, when you were presenting at Creative Mornings. And I remember listening to your talk and I was like, oh my God, this guy is the person I need on my podcast. And I was just very excited about everything that you do, because it's just very aligned to a lot of the work that I do. And so I was like, oh, let me sneak down and see if I can talk to you and see if I can get you on your show. And you were super open to it. And so it's been really cool getting to know you and having you on the show today. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're traveling in Canada right now. You have big things going on. So I so appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. So I start all of my episodes talking about purpose. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what does purpose mean to you?
Yeah, it's a funny one, right? I think for those who have purpose, they don't need to ask the question of whether or not they're living their purpose. And for everyone else, it's like you just need to find your purpose and then you'll figure it out. But you're like, wait, how do I find this thing? And I think in my case, it's been a little bit of a journey of feeling like I find it and then kind of losing it and then catching up with it again. And so I think these days I'm less in the question of asking what is my purpose and more around the question of like, am I enjoying the journey and do I feel like there's momentum and then am I headed in the direction that I want to be going? And the purpose piece of the puzzle almost feels a little bit less important to figure out and find. because purpose changes, right? Like what you love changes, what the world needs is changing, what you care about is changing. Like all these, like everything is always morphing and shifting, and our priorities shift with that. And so to lock yourself in a purpose, I think doesn't quite fit my personality type. I think it's because my personality type really enjoys like novelty. Like I love like I one of my core values is curiosity and adventure. And so you can see how that would be slightly misaligned with finding one purpose for the rest of your life.
I love that. Well, so I want to go into your journey a little bit because it's super interesting. So, can you talk a little bit? So, you started off as an engineer. So, how did you decide to be an engineer? And I saw specifically you were working in like mining. So, can you talk a little bit about what that was like why you decided to go into engineering?
Yeah. Well, I'm Canadian, so I went to university in Canada, McGill University, and when I went to the open house at 16 years old, I had in my mind that I was going to be a mechanical engineer because my dad's a mechanical engineer and I was good at math and physics. And so I kind of go to the open house and I talk to different people. And there's like, I think, like chemical, mechanical, electrical, civil. Um, and then I just stumble in on this other booth and it's called mining. And I'm like, wait, what's mining? I've never heard of this before. And they're like, yeah, well, we have the best travel opportunities. We have the highest pay. We have the smallest classrooms. Like our entire department gets the same amount of money as these other departments, except there's only like 15 students per year. And I'm like, well, that all sounds wonderful. Let's just do it. So I applied for mining engineering and I got it. And I never really had a passion for anything like rocks or anything along those lines. But I think I was very much in the mindset as an Asian kid growing up that like, after elementary school, you go to middle school. After middle school, you go to high school. After high school, you go to university. So this was just another thing to do. And it was really only when I was 6 months away from graduating or so that I was like, wait a minute, what happens next? Oh no, like I am I supposed to work in this field that I really just don't care about? And unfortunately for me, I didn't really have a plan B. It's not like I had anything better to hop to, and my parents were pretty adamant about me finishing my 4 year education instead of just pivoting 6 months before ending. And so I ended up graduating, got a job, and on the evenings and weekends, I had a hobby of taking pictures. At the time, it didn't feel that significant, primarily because I was the kind of person that was hopping from hobby to hobby. I at some point was like playing paintball. At some point, I wanted to be a stuntman. So I mean, I was just doing all sorts of crazy things, and the the photography thing ended up sticking so much so that I started earning money with it. I started having a small little business with it. I was finding community. And after about 3.5 years of doing photography on the side as this kind of hobby slash passion, uh, I woke up one day and it wasn't so much that I wanted to be an artist. It was just that like I woke up one day and I didn't have to go to work, but I felt like I had to go just to show my face and log hours. And I was like, but there's nothing for me to do. And I was just like, what am I doing? And I just remember thinking like I might not know what I want to do with my life, but I know exactly what I don't want to do, and that's this. Like I don't want to sit here
Mhm.
at a bigger desk in 10 years earning more money. Like that's not the goal. So I might not know what else is out there, but I know this is not it. So I better quit. And I was so uncertain about my future that I tried to get fired. Like I actually because when you get fired, you can apply for unemployment in Canada. And so I was like, oh shit, can you guys fire me? And they're like, no, we can't. Sorry. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll resign anyways. And that was it. That was the beginning of my artistic journey in 2012 full time.
Cool. So, since you were already making money like in photography, did you already feel kind of secure in being able to make that change, or how did that feel for you?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I was earning money, but I was basically taking every single dollar I was earning and just buying more equipment with it. So like first year, I think I earned $10,000 and I spent $10,000, and then second year it was like earned $20,000 and I spent $20,000. So I just like there's just so much gear and toys to buy when I was first working. And but that being said, because I lived at home with my parents that entire time when I had a day job, I was just saving money. Like I had no expenses, and all my hobby expenses were covered by my hobby itself. And so I did have like a bunch of savings that I had accrued over that 3 years where I just felt like, well, worst case scenario, I just go back to school, right? So like when I first quit, my plan was to get a master's in business. So I had applied for my GMAT and I was getting ready to get an MBA. Um, but then things started picking up in photography, so I never did plan A. Plan B was like if I run out, if like I can't get in a good enough school, then I would just maybe get another job. And then like plan C was like do the artist thing. And it just so happened that the artist thing ended up working out. I think I never wanted to be an artist because artists always felt like they were a step down on like the social hierarchy. It also felt like it was a lot more unstable and unpredictable. And so it was never like an object of desire. And now fast forward, it's like what, like 15 years later or something, and I'm like, what is it, 15? No, it's like 10. 10 years later, I'm like, I don't know, like I still kind of wonder what I'm doing with my life, but I can't really think of anything more meaningful or exciting or more aligned with like who I am and what I've done. It's like I basically don't know how to be anything else, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. So it's interesting, like that kind of like impression that you had around it being like a lower tier occupation. Like, do you still consider that to be the case? Like now that you're in it for so long?
Actually, it's really interesting. So there's this phrase that I really like, which is that artists can sit at the table of kings and peasants. And then what it basically means is that artists travel between worlds, right? I'm here in Ottawa right now, where the United Nations is gathering like 4,000 delegates from 150 different countries that are trying to negotiate a global plastic treaty, right? And in here, there are a lot of important people, and people are struggling to get access to certain folks. And I can just send an email to the executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program and say, "Hey, I see you're in town. Like, do you want to catch up?" And actually get an answer and get a meeting and get an endorsement when people have been trying for years to get access to her. And I think it's precisely because I'm an artist, that people have their guard down. And so it allows me to almost be a human with so many other folks who are in higher positions of power. And this has happened many, many times. And then at the same time, I don't think anyone truly takes me seriously. So no one really like there is power in the work that I do, but at the same time I don't naturally have any power. Like I don't have the power to make decisions. And so the power that I have is a form of soft power. I can facilitate a lot of stuff. I can insinuate a lot of stuff. I was speaking in front of like the plenary session in front of the 4,000 delegates to open up the session. And I was talking to all like my scientist colleagues and I was like, can we just fact check this? Is there something that you want me to say for you that you probably don't have the opportunity to say? And so I end up in these really weird situations, but I don't know if people truly take me seriously. And so it's both a strength and a weakness. And this is mirrored in my everyday interactions where in some circles I'm like a rock star and in other circles like people look down at the name badge and then they just walk away the other direction. They don't want to talk to you. They're just like, you're not worth my time. So you have a little bit of everything, but maybe that's just what it means to be human. I mean, I wonder if it's the same for other folks who aren't in like, I don't know, an A-list position of power.
That's super interesting. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like you can function on all levels and it's I almost see it as like it helps you like keep your ego in check though too, where it's like you don't think that you're some hot shot, but you're like it's like humbling. It's like your phrase of humble badasses, which you like to the group that you've been forming here in the city.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that being an artist necessarily comes with being humble. I mean, there are some really
Mm,
arrogant bastards out there
fair.
who think they're on the top of the world just because they're an artist and because they think art is like the highest calling possible, and sometimes they end up in situations where people treat them that way. Um, but that may just be less of like a professional trait and more of a character trait, right? And to bring it back to the humble badasses, like I think there are humble badasses in every domain. And for me, I am most excited when I'm able to hang out with these folks that are really sitting in their own power, their own knowledge in the world in which they stand, and they're constantly able to contribute positively in small and big ways, and who still somehow, despite this outsized impact they're having on the world, they manage to show up for the people that are close to them. And I think that sort of balance of human is what I would consider like the ideal kind of person that I would like to try and aspire to cultivate friendships with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Well, so taking from there, it's like it's like you describe your own personal impression of yourself as kind of walking in between these worlds. And to your point, it's like it's not necessarily a descriptor of just an artist, period. I think that's more like something that you're taking on as far as the way that you see your place, right? So, but I'm curious, kind of like, as like how has that been this journey of like, so you move into this art world, and then it's like, how has that journey been in terms of like creating more of this, I don't know, platform that you now have and being able to like hold more space as an artist?
Yeah, so I guess to describe a little bit my earlier work, I was the kind of person that was always trying to figure out how to do the craziest thing that I possibly could with whatever resources I had. And so there's this constant, almost like a magician trying to pull off like these really cool stunts and getting people to wonder like, oh, how did you do it? And so some of my earlier kind of viral hits were maybe lighting a person on fire while they were riding a motorcycle, or tying a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck in Bali, or suspending people from a 40-story skyscraper, right? Like I do all these like crazy stunts, photograph them, and then teach people how it was done. And I think this sort of approach of saying like, oh, what's the next craziest thing I can do actually makes you constantly like, well, you're stuck in sort of an infinite growth pattern. You're always trying to do something bigger and crazier, and more wild. And I was on that track for a little bit, a little while, until I eventually pivoted to do the social impact stuff. And I think, my change of focus to doing things on social impact put a little pause on that need to do crazy things as big as possible, because I was starting to figure out, well, like, how do I combine it with impact? But it soon caught up, right? Like I went storm chasing to raise awareness for climate change, chasing these huge supercells that were traveling at 50 miles an hour across the Great Plains. I tied a model underwater with some sharks swimming around. Then I put a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles, and then I, created a Guinness World Record art installation out of 168,000 plastic straws. And you're just doing things, and they're getting bigger, they're getting crazier, they're getting more impactful. And then I built up a following, and then I'd have videos that were getting millions of views. And there's always this question of like, well, what's next? Like, how can I do better than the last thing that I could do? And a combination of just like A, not caring so much about algorithms and having the world shift around me, and then B, just maybe my work wasn't as resonant with the times. There was just kind of like this feeling that I had caught a wave of popularity and then kind of like lost it. And I started to just really doubt the efficiency of the work that I was doing. And so when I say about efficiency, like I'm talking about the combination of the time, energy, effort, the amount of money that you're going to get, and the amount of impact that's going to create. And it felt like that entire equation for quite a while, actually, for like a number of years, was pretty unbalanced. And I kept trying to figure it out. I kept trying to tweak it, and I just was never able to quite find that right ratio. So much so that I almost ended up quitting my job last year. And by quitting my job, I meant just like seriously reconsidering, did I want to be an artist? Should I look around and try to figure out like how to apply to a job? Actually, I applied to a couple of things just because I was curious. No one ever called me back, but I tried. I was really having a ton of self doubt about my chosen pathway, my chosen direction. Um, yeah, I mean, I can keep monologuing.
I mean, I feel like there's more to the story, so please continue.
Yeah. Well, I guess what changed from that point forward was like a lot of internal self-reflection, where I think we live in a society that's consistently prioritizing abundance, trying to say like you can have anything that you want. All you need to do is manifest it, or buy a course, or work harder, or any number of strategies that can help you get whatever it is that you desire. Actually, the entire industry of marketing is built on this idea that you can get something that you you deserve more than you currently have, essentially. And I think that creates like a sense of, well, it basically makes you feel like you're never good enough, and that nothing you have is enough. And I think that when you try to prioritize abundance across all the verticals of your life, like, so let's say health, love, friendship, like lifestyle, location, job, purpose, impact, like so forth. And you're like, I can have all of it. I just need to work harder, do better, blah, blah, blah. then you end up in this like weird situation where you're never going to have all of it. You're never going to have all of it at the same time because it's impossible. How do you have
Yeah.
everything at the same time all the time? It does not, doesn't how, it isn't even how it works. And if maybe for a minute you get there, it'll re-equalize so that whatever perfect situation you thought you had is not going to be as perfect anymore. And so this quest for abundance across all axes of our lives and our careers, I think is actually a recipe for failure. It's like you're sort of doomed to never get there. And I think reflecting a lot on that, where I still remember these conversations I would have with my friends, where they would say like, "Okay, well, you're never satisfied with your work. You're never satisfied with your campaigns. Like, can you even enjoy the success when it's there?" And I'm like, kind of like, no. And I just thought it was more like a feature rather than a bug, because that desire for more would help me, cultivate this insatiable desire to do better and to do more. But at some point, that kind of burns out. I think the novelty of that ends up burning itself out, and you start you you lose the very enthusiasm and the joy of play and prototyping and experimentation that first got you there in the first place. And so I think one of the big shifts that I had the previous year was really focusing on reframing abundance into enoughness, and to really thinking about asking myself that question of like, how much is enough? Um, and the mantra that really worked for me was, I deserve enough to thrive. And I think that phrasing is like pretty important. So the deserving piece makes it sort of mandatory, sort of phrases it almost like as a human need. The enoughness is self-explanatory, but enough to thrive, because it's not just enough to survive, but rather enough to thrive, which I think is very different. And enoughness, I think, changes over time, because what's enough today will be different in a few years when you're older, when you have kids, when you have different ambitions. Um, but when you focus on like enoughness and you know what you're trying to do with your life, then you're able to see what is missing. And more often than not, it's only one or two things that you'll feel like it's missing. Because like maybe it's only money, maybe it's only friendship, maybe it's only love. Because all the other stuff, I mean, of course, it would be better if there was more, but you have enough to keep doing what you're doing, enough to live out these curiosities and fantasies of yours. And so if you have enoughness and you know what you don't have enough on, then now you know what to focus on. And I think it just helps give your life so much more clarity and so much more gratitude, because you can now be grateful for all the abundance, the paradoxical abundance that's now in your life, because you've established what the baseline truly is.
I love that because it's like giving yourself more definition to what you really need instead of it just being this kind of like, well, you're always chasing more, right? Is that never ending thing that you were talking about? And I think it's so interesting, like this idea that you were talking about how your art was always this kind of like grandiosity of needing it to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so then it just becomes like, well, if there is no limit to that, it's like, how do you enjoy what you're doing? So do you feel like you have found a better balance to that, or like how is that really manifested for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think these days it's really evolved into something a lot more comfortable. I feel like I have a lot more gratitude for what I do have, and also it just really helps me prioritize whatever it is I'm currently working towards. So, moving to New York in part was because I realized that the one thing that I really wish that I had was community, because I think like what I don't have enough of is a sense of belonging. Um, and so like while I'm able to go to any country in the world and build some pretty cool art and create and craft an entire team, what I don't have is like a recurring group of people that I can do that with. And so finding out how do I build the scaffolding of my life and my career, as opposed to just trying to jump higher on a trampoline, or keep pushing the bar higher, has been a really important reframe. Uh, and then I think with the another piece of enoughness that has been particularly cathartic was around my need to have an impact. I think for the longest time, I saw myself very much as the hero in the hero's journey, where in the hero's journey, you set out to conquer all of the world's evils, and it falls under the responsibility of this one person, right? Like the Luke
Mhm.
Skywalker or the Frodo Baggins or whatever, this one character, this main character of the story that is meant to figure everything out. And the fate of the universe depends on them figuring it out. And I think we just grow up. I mean, no one ever like watches a movie and says like, "Oh, I'm like the B character." Right? You watch a movie and you generally see yourself as the A character, and that just creates this story that we kind of live into, I suppose, where we believe that that's also supposed to be like we're the center of our own destiny, and whatever chosen path we have to change the world in that way just becomes our responsibility. And I think that puts a lot of weight on a person. It also maybe I think maybe this doesn't resonate for everyone, but like one of my other core values is change and transformation. So like I like growth, internal growth and external growth, like contributing to making the world better is like a, a core value of like what drives me. And because it is a core value, it really makes me. I think this prioritization of impact has been really high, and so when I was questioning my efficiency as an individual to change everything, that's why it was particularly hard for me. Um, and by sort of like letting go of the need to be the only person that's meant to solve everything, because that kind of doesn't make sense. Um, that's also really helped, and so it reduced a lot of the burden that was on my shoulders to, you know, change everything on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you talking about this idea where you're like, well, I can't single-handedly like fix the world's problems, and so I definitely, it is true. It's like finding like-minded people who are also trying to kind of bring forth great change into this world, and it's like collectively we can create greater change than individually. So I love that idea.
Sure. I mean, it's the way the vast majority of the world works. I think we just have this idea, especially in Western culture, you'll pick out these hero figures, right? Like the Jeff Bezoses of the world or the Steve Jobs, and be like, oh look, one person is shifting the fate of the entire galaxy. And there are people like that, but I think the vast majority of us actually operate within a much more interconnected ecosystem. We are communities of people striving to make things better, and one might argue that it is probably the concentration of that much power in the hands of so few that is responsible for most of the problems that we encounter in our lives.
Mhm. Fair point. Fair point. So along the like with having kind of grown this platform that and being able to be in places like the UN and everything that you're doing right now, what do you think has really helped you kind of evolve your career and shape you into like where you are today?
I have to choose one thing.
You can choose a few.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, there are some things that feel very simple to me that I think maybe like they feel obvious to me, but I guess maybe they're not. So I'm trying to think of the a couple that stand out. So like one way that I live my life that I think is quite different from other people is that I live with a lot of intersectionality in the way I manage my time. And so what does that mean? That means that like I try as much as possible to stack my interests on top of each other. And the more stacks something has, the more I prioritize it. And so if I can build new friendships that are relevant to my work while going on an adventure and having fun to plan and create something meaningful, like I try to do everything with the ands. And so like I don't tend to do anything for one reason. I tend to do everything for like multiple reasons at the same time. And by stacking those, I think you gain a greater efficiency of time. Um, and I don't really know how to break that down into a process, but it's just kind of the way my brain works, right? So an example is I went and spoke on Creative Mornings, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be doing a talk. I want to practice to do something new and different. And I wanted to use it as an opportunity to play and prototype. and I wanted to figure out how to get more volunteers for future projects, and I really wanted to figure out how to build community. And so even though I was up there delivering a talk, I had all these sort of desires in the back of my mind. Like the reason I said yes was ultimately because I just moved to New York City. This is Creative Mornings New York. I'm able to make new friends. And so at the end of my talk, I put up a QR code, which you filled out,
Mhm.
saying, if you want to be my friend, please fill out this form. And I just had like a ton of questions. And that is turning into the foundation for how I'm going to attempt to practice building community. Like I don't even know if it's going to work, but I'm going to practice and play and prototype and experiment with this group of people in a way that felt like safe. And so I kind of like I'm always thinking about how things work in conjunction with each other. So that's one. Um, Another thing that I think I've gotten fairly good at doing um, is figuring out the game of leverage. So I do things that look really impressive very often, or maybe not anymore, but in the past, like very often with not much resources. Like for the longest time, I would pull off like the project of tying a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck in Bali. Like I just happened to be on vacation then. I just got my dive certification. Someone introduced me to a friend. Two models flew themselves in to participate in this photo shoot. A dress designer contributed for free and makeup. I broke the camera I was going to use, but someone in the dive shop happened to have another camera that I could pull off. And I managed to create this series, ended up getting like 1.5 million views on a video made by a guy who I had just met at a workshop that I was teaching in photography in Singapore, who flew himself over for one day to make this video. Like so many random things had to happen to go right for that one project to work. But if someone was to like pay for it to produce that, that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars, right? And then even then, like, how do you get all these people to fly in to do something? We have You have like this idea, right? This idea that is wild, and then you need to be able to figure out like what are your what are the most critical pieces of that puzzle. The most critical piece of the puzzle is in this case like safety. We need someone who knows how to do this. And so the minute I found the person who was like, I can be the dive master that will safeguard everything, then that became like the linchpin that I could barter to say, hey, we have a team, we have a location to pull this off. All we need is like a model or a dress. And then you kind of leverage one thing against another to then create the access to whatever it is that you're hoping and aspiring to build. And this is still true today. Like right now, I'm trying to build an art installation at the global treaty negotiations in Korea, and I'm like leveraging my time here in to get testimonials, to build relationships with all the different nonprofits and the organizations, trying to understand the culture by saying, hey, I'm the artist that created the art that is currently here. I would like to do the same in Korea. I'm not even saying that I have raised funds or not raised funds or anything like that. I'm really just saying like I would like to find the right people to talk to because I know that the minute I have a location that says yes, I can leverage that to find the other pieces of the puzzle, the other partnerships necessary to pull it together. And so you kind of have to identify what you need first and foremost and how you can leverage them against each other. And sometimes it's just by saying, it's just assuming you're going to have it, like assuming you have the funding and pretending you just say, I have the funding, I just need a location. And then to the location, you're like, you're saying like, hey, or to the funder, you're saying like, hey, I just need the funding, I have the location. And then if it changes, it changes, but that's just what life is. Like life changes all the time. And so I'm not saying that you really lie. It's not about lying because you're not trying to deceive people. You're just coming at it with so much conviction and belief that something is actually possible so that people can believe in it too. And very often I think with projects, especially the ones that I've done, is like people participate in things that they don't quite know if it's going to work or not. They'll still come in because they're just so curious. They're just like, wait, no, I don't get it. Like I just need to see this. I need to see what happens next. Like I'm so confused. And then at the end, they get to say like, oh my gosh, I was part of this thing. Like I saw this thing happen. Like I can't believe it got here. And I was a contributor in this thing. And I think that's really like in part like part of the performance magic of large scale ambitious projects like these. And I think I remember someone asking me like, oh, what's the secret to getting volunteers? I'm like, well, it's interesting. I think sometimes maybe some people just don't think big enough and they're scared to try something too big. But the truth is like something quite small with no stakes is a lot less interesting than something that is quite big with more stakes. And of course, you have to work your way up to it. Um, but yeah, it's like people like to be involved in things that are interesting.
I love everything you said. It was reminding me of how you sent me when we first met the Notion document of your mind, like a peek
Oh,
inside of Von Wong's mind. And
yeah.
I looked at it and and you were like, "Oh, let me know what you think." I didn't tell you what you think until now, and what I think is like, "Wow, that was a lot." And it was like, but it was amazing. Like I was just like, "Wow, the ability for you to like kind of put into words the way that your mechanics of your brain is working was very fascinating. And I was just like so intrigued. But I love what you were just saying here. And because it was just, I feel like it was really highlighting that how you were saying earlier that your value is curiosity. And I was like, I
Mm.
can see that. I've definitely been honing in on this idea of like, how do you make the impossible possible? And I feel like that is part of like you and I share that kind of like thought process where it's just like, well, if you stretch yourself beyond what you think is possible or what you think is impossible, then like you create it into possibility. And I feel like that's what you're speaking to right there.
Yeah. And in so many ways, like it doesn't always need to be that big or crazy. Like the act of creating art is basically the act of like taking something that was in your mind and like manifesting it into reality. And so like there is something really cool about that, that like something you thought of yesterday can actually be like real the next day. Um, and if you just, continue practicing that and not only getting good at doing it yourself, but getting other people to believe in it, it's kind of wild. I mean, I love to show pencil sketches of my concepts. Like literally, I remember drawing a stick figure for like my Guinness World Record art installation around straws. It was just like a little dude and like a V that I drew to kind of represent what the waves are. And that's kind of still how I'm pitching things to clients. Like my project that I just did on the High Line in New York with Keels. I mean, that was also just a little doodle on the iPad. It was like a little mountain of trash with like these little mirrors like snaking outwards. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that you guys actually bought my paper sketch. And somehow, and I don't think they bought the paper sketch. I think they bought the story and they bought the history and they bought my belief in the idea. But like when you reduce it down to the paper sketch, you're like, yeah, well, this is kind of crazy.
I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is when you first said when we started this and you were like, "Yeah, my purpose is in large scale objects of curiosity." I was like, "What does that even mean?" But I've seen your large scale objects of curiosity now, and I'm like, and they start out as doodle sketches, is what you're telling me.
They do. They do. Everything starts with a doodle sketch.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious. Do you feel like you've always been this kind of like curious, like out there making me like, because I can't imagine, obviously you started in engineering, which is a totally different zone. Like, do you feel like that's just always been part of your framework of your like the inner workings of your mind, or how is that kind of developed for you?
I don't know. I mean, when I was younger, I hated travel. I mean, okay, wait. So I guess I went to 13 different schools in three different countries and three different languages. And so I was always traveling with my parents. But like I was a huge book nerd. And so like we would be in, I don't know, Rome or something. And my parents would be like, let's go out and go check out the sights. And I was like, can I just read in the hotel? Like I just don't, like, I don't even know why we're here. Like this is so stupid. And so I was like really not that curious of a child. I was much more interested in traveling in like fictional worlds than in the real one. Um, and similarly, like when I was in university, I wasn't doing all that much. It wasn't like I was making tons of friends or anything like that. I think I was at this time, what was I doing? I was doing like parkour and I thought it would be interesting to become a stuntman because it combined filmmaking and parkour at the same time. And then that eventually, I think I remember in 1 year of university being like, man, it would be so good to be a truck driver because then I could just play video games for 6 months out of the year and drive trucks for the other 6 months of the year. Like I really, I just really didn't come from, there was like no hints of awesomeness in my childhood. I was actually like, I think I was like surprisingly mediocre at everything. Like my parents, being good Asian parents, like I played the violin, I did martial arts, we did all sorts of classes like clay making, painting, drawing, sketching. And I was just mediocre at all of it. So it's like never felt like I was gonna be some kind of crazy artist. I was also a mediocre student. Yeah, I'm like a solid B plus student. Just never quite really was great at anything except maybe decent at math. Um, and even as I was like, I think just photography was the first time I had like picked up a skill and I was like comparing myself to other people and I'm like, oh, I'm learning this pretty fast. I think it's the intersection of something that was like both artistic and technical at the same time, where, to get the basic physics of photography, you need a there's there's a lot of technique to it, but then after that just to understand the machine, but then after that the rest is creative. So that worked really well. I think that like some skills that I gained from childhood took a while to blossom. One of them was probably so as a result of being in 13 different schools in three different countries in three different languages, constantly being the new kid on the block, is that I was really good
Mhm.
at making new friends and really
Mhm.
bad at and really good at losing friends. And so that enabled me to like network very effectively, right? Like I can travel, I can make friends, I can say bye to them, and I can just move through life really quickly that way. Um, my video game experience. So when I was playing video games, what you have to do, so I like had joined like a guild and I was like trading on like on these websites. And and this was in the earlier days of the internet, and so I had to learn how to create trust with people I had never met before,
Mm.
right? To build a reputation. And like those are skills that I think really helped me become an earlier day influencer, which I didn't have. Like how to interact with people, how to be compelling on a screen. Um, yeah, and like maybe I don't know, the I was never really good in front of like a theater or improv or anything like that, but I did do a summer camp where I was like a camp counselor in front of a bunch of kids. And so I think in that there was like this development of the ability to like be in front of an audience that probably helped me as I was starting to become an influencer once again. So it's less like a function of like Ben is destined for greatness, and more like Ben just got dealt this really weird mixture of cards, and he made something out of it. It was kind of unpredictable, and 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 I think maybe more than anything else, the thing I have to credit for my success is really just I started like when I discovered photography and when I started being recognized as a half decent photographer, and when I almost just started like believing in myself, and that
Mm.
belief in my own ability to create my own life cascaded and allowed me to kind of it's like fuel that feeds itself. Um, but I had to like find a frictionless way to get there. And the frictionless way to get there was to find something that I was really excited to learn and do. And so, you know, as I've gotten older, when I was going through that whole period of trying to figure out what to do with my life, I just kept going back to this time where I was like, when I just discovered photography, I was filled with so much passion and so much excitement and so much joy just to play and experiment and explore. And I was just like, how do I get back to that? Because I feel that like the next phase of my evolution, like my next 10 years, it needs to get back to that place of just having so much fun that it doesn't feel like work, so I can get really good at something new. And I think one key ingredient of that, and one of the reasons why I've been focused on this ever since moving to New York City, is finding community. Because everything that I do is human collaboration. Like while the art that I create the form might change, what it actually is a form of collaboration. We're just bringing different people from different walks of life doing different weird things together to do cool things. And if I can find a group of people that believe in that want to like invest in that, and that want to do it together, that are the humble badasses, then I think that feels like I would be able to just unlock a whole new world that I have not yet. I don't even know how to define yet.
I love that. So well, I was like, oh my God, so many questions. But but one thing I want to ask you is like, how have your parents kind of taken all these like twists and turns that your life has taken?
Yeah, I mean, my mom, I think, is still waiting for me to get a real job. And then, but on the flip side, like my parents are super engaged. Like they help me in all my projects. Like they drove down to Ottawa just to say hi and deliver a bunch of food for me. And they came all the way down to New York when the art installation was up and brought my nephew so that we could take some photos of him together for the project up on the High Line. And they're super engaged, they're super involved. I think they're proud. They just don't really understand what's going on in my life. And to be honest, like I don't even know what's going on in my life half the time. So, um, yeah, the relationship I'd say is it continues to be like a little bit contentious. And it's contentious because my parents have known a lot of struggle. They're like first generation immigrants. They came here with
Mm.
nothing. And so for them, there's just a desire for their son to have a safe and secure and stable life. But then I think the one phrase that my dad said to my mom maybe like 3, 4, 5 years back that really made a difference was um, I think she was like just complaining about my life again for a while. And then my dad said, the reason that we worked so hard was so that our kids didn't have to live the same life as we did. And I think we're successful because like I would never have been able to live this life had they not created that entire blanket of security for it. And so
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's helped quite a little bit.
Did they support you like when you first like left your engineering job?
My parents have always been supportive in actions, just not in words,
Mm.
right? Like they'll always show up to things. They'll always if I need help, they're always there. But that doesn't mean that they like approve of it.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. Okay, so then to go back to the other thing that I was thinking about, like this whole community stuff that you were talking about. Yeah, I love it because I was thinking about it, how you've been building all this like collaboration and so much around that. You're like, actually, can you talk a little bit about how you're living in like this communal space in Brooklyn?
Right. So after COVID, I was like, I need to just travel and move around, and so I ended up in an RV floating around, being basically a mobile roommate to some friends. Anyways, while I was doing that, one of my friends sent me this 1 month co-living experiment in Morocco, where like 40 people were going to take over a tiny boutique hotel, and we're going to co-create an entire month together, where we would design our own workshops, design our own shows, attend whatever we wanted to, work at the same time. And then on the evenings we'd go out, like, oh, sorry, on the weekends we'd go out on some like adventures out in Morocco or whatever. And I just remember going through that experience and being like, I think that I am the best version of myself when I'm surrounded by community because I am a little bit of a workaholic, and what that means is like I just sit in front of a computer and I just work on stuff. And that means that like unless someone drags me out to do something, someone invites me out to do something, I don't go. But when you live with people, and they're doing stuff around you, then you just participate because it would be stupid not to participate because it's right there in front of you. And so you end up having like a much richer existence, and a much richer life. Um, and I think as long as you're good at protecting your own boundaries, it's like, you know when to say no to things, then I think it works out pretty well. And so when I was, after that experience, I started traveling around trying to figure out like which country do I want to live in, kind of culture do I want to have, where do I find these humble badasses to like, you know, live in community with, and it just felt like there were so many places that you could go that were about exiting society, like going into your own remote space and having this own microculture, of change makers or basically, I guess, modern radical hippies or something. And I was just like, I don't think that's what I really want because I want to be in a place, like, I want to be in the center of where things are happening. I don't want to transition on my own. I want to like figure out how to move the entire world with me. I want to be a part of society, not exited from society. Which ultimately led me to New York. And then in New York, I was just like, all right, I need to figure out how I can have this community living thing. And there aren't that many community living situations in New York, surprisingly, considering how many people live there. But I basically found this 17-person co-living community called Lightning Society on the internet. And initially, I was like, I don't think this group is for me. They're way too party centric,
Mm.
and because they host rooftop parties and they host these musical salons, I'm like, I'm not sure it's my vibe. But I ultimately like sent it to one of my friends who we were thinking about living together initially, and then he ended up living at Lightning and inviting me over to come check it out. And I remember walking through the space and being like, oh my gosh, this is like really nice. Like it, they may host parties, but they have an amazing culture, amazing community culture, and beautiful like 20-foot tall ceilings. Every room is a lofted room. We have 50-person event spaces. We have a private rooftop. We have tons of amenities. And it was just like a really beautifully laid out space that was actually fairly affordable. And and so the minute I visited, I was like, okay, no, I think this is right for me. And just so happens that, within a week of visiting, a room was going to open up because some guy wasn't getting his visa renewed. And I was like, okay, well, this is it. And so I snagged the room, ended up in New York, even though I wasn't necessarily ready for it at this time, but the opportunity was there, had to take it. And here we are, living in a 17-person co-living community. And it's been great. You should visit.
I definitely will. I'm like, I just gotta figure out like when is your next event, and I'll be there.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's turned out like the best like living situation for New York for you then. Is
I think
that,
so, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the people that I live with aren't necessarily my people.
Mm.
And I've been trying to articulate why that is. It's not that they're bad people, they're all nice people. They're definitely not activists. But I think that, and I've had some debates with some of my housemates about this because they don't all agree. But I think that the people at Lightning have as one of their core values fun. They like to have fun, and fun is fun for me is a consequence of doing things that are meaningful, right? Like if I'm out there experimenting, meeting cool people, and having a unique experience, then that is fun. But I think for them, they like to do things for fun, to build community, for fun, to blah blah blah, right? So fun, for the most part, and I think it's like obviously I don't want to generalize, but I think fun is a very important key piece of their culture, and I think that I simply work differently. But I will say that living with people who aren't necessarily my people has actually been quite refreshing because I'm meeting an entire new set of individuals who operate under different parameters. And in some ways, it's felt it's been like a relief because when I go home, I'm not trying to impress anyone. Like I'm already working a shit ton harder than everyone else just by default. And so like I never feel bad. I never feel like I'm not doing enough or anything like that. Like it's really a home where I can come back to and feel, yeah, enoughness. Like it's a place where I can come back and I can feel like I'm enough. And so I'm still like a little unsure. Like I'm like, would it be better if I had more like hardworking, crazy ass doers mixed into this ecosystem? Maybe, but time will tell. We'll have to play it out.
Just find it really interesting, this idea of this community. But it is true. It's almost like if you were surrounded by all doers, then I feel like that would just feed your doing, right? Like it would just
My
make you,
workaholicness.
yeah, it would just make you more of a workaholic. And
Yeah.
as someone that also struggles with that, I feel like it's like you do need that levity of people who are just like, no, we're just gonna like have fun and not be so serious
Yeah.
and so hardworking right now. So I can definitely see that being beneficial for us workaholics.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, well, let me ask you, is there anything else that we haven't covered off on that you would like to share?
I mean, I'm not sure who's listening to this podcast, but if you identify as a humble badass and you want to be my friend, you should fill up humblebadass.nyc. I guess I will caveat this by saying that I'm actually looking for friends specifically in New York City, and ideally who live fairly close to me. This is like everything here is hypothetical because I've never really built community before. But like I think that you really ideally want to have physical proximity to the people that you want to get close to so that you can actually have the opportunities to cultivate the serendipitous interactions that are really hard to do when you can only interact with folks that are planned in a planned way. And so I live in East Williamsburg on the Morgan L station, and you can find me on Google Maps because Lightning Society is Googleable. Um, but yeah, this doesn't mean that you can't fill out the form otherwise. I think in general, it's been really fun to try to cultivate community, and I am always curious to meet new people. So if you want to reach out, humblebadass.nyc. I'm hoping to start pulling more and more little casual events together. If not for me to make new friends, but rather for people to make friends amongst each other to get to a space from, away from thinking and into doing, I think is just really, really cool. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you already had an event. What was that, like two
Did.
weekends ago,
And
which
you
was
came to
fun.
it.
I did. I did.
Did
It
you
was
follow up with
great.
anyone? Did you make friends?
I did make friends. I definitely need to get on the Miro board and follow up with
Yeah.
everyone and start actioning on everything. But
You
we had a
just
great time.
inspiration fades fast, and then you just go like, yeah, I'll do it later. I'm busy. Like, how do you cultivate friendships if everyone's just like, I'll do it later. I'm busy. That's been like the big little experiments to crack and to figure out.
I feel like you have to like create action in the moment is the thing. Because I will say like I think it would have been better if I had just created like a group right then and there for us to like start chatting and planning.
A WhatsApp group right away.
Yeah, yeah. Just a little thought I had.
Yeah.
But yeah. Because
See,
you're right. It's like it's already been what, like a week and a half since then. And so then yeah, you lose some enthusiasm. Like you got to catch it while you got it.
you do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
But yeah.
We'll have mandatory make friends moment.
Do it right
Yeah.
now.
Make
I'm
friends.
sure people will love that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into our final questions then.
All right. Let's
Uh,
do it.
okay. So your first question is, how would you describe your current relationship to yourself?
I think my current relationship is pretty good. It's gentle, graceful, and curious, but also firm. And I feel like I'm in a really good place where I think I know what makes me tick, and I'm able to experiment to prove out these hypotheses. So, yeah, I think my relationship right now is to myself is currently really healthy, which is nice.
I love that. All right. What is something that you're currently working on?
I am currently working on trying to figure out how to contact the Minister of Environment of Korea and the Foreign Affairs Minister of Korea because they hold the keys to creating art at the INC5 Global Plastic Treaty negotiations in Busan.
That is so specific. Best of
Specific.
luck. It's so specific.
Yes.
I'm like, well, I certainly do not know how to help you with that, but
You
I,
never know. You're like these crazy requests are really funny because it sounds impossible, but you're really just the one right person away from figuring it out. It's kind of wild to think about it that for most of your problems in your life, you're one conversation away from figuring it out. And if you can just tell every single person you know what you're trying to look for, we just have like 3, 4, 5 degrees of separation between most of the things that we want in life. So
so true, so true. And I love that. It's like you gotta speak it out loud
yeah,
and so people know what you're looking for.
exactly,
Otherwise, they can't help you.
exactly.
I love that. Okay. What do you consider most valuable to you right now?
Faith, sort of faith in myself, which I think I had lost for a while and recently feels like I found. And that just like it feels both new and exciting. Um, yeah.
Hmm.
Or faith
I
in
love that.
it's both faith in myself and my work. Like they're kind of synonymous to one another, which might not be true for everyone. But yeah.
Cool. All right. Next is what is the best lesson you've learned recently?
Um, I think recently it's maybe yeah, it's a simple lesson. It's not a new lesson, but it's a simple reminder that like um to not assume that you know things. So I'm trying to build this art installation that I designed in Korea, and I built this entire scaled miniature model for it. And I got really deep on the concept without ever having a conversation with anyone from Korea to see if it was going to be a fit. And and so I have this concept, and I've been here talking to a bunch of Korean people, like really proudly showing off this thing, and realizing that actually the concept may not fly because of Korea's relationship to the fossil fuel industry, which is built on like how they lifted themselves out of poverty, and there's like a lot of loyalty to industry, and how they have very different safety regulations and standardizations in Korea. And so the relationship to these topics that are so obvious for me as someone who's coming at it from a North American perspective is actually not the same for a country that like I assumed just because I read online that they were part of like the High Ambition Coalition, which is part of which is the ambitious segment of the global plastic treaty negotiations, is, I just assumed that they were closely aligned to the same ambitions as a country like Canada or the United States. And just realizing how far off I was. And I think there's just something like, I mean, it's kind of like obvious. Like if you want to build art in Korea, maybe you should talk to the person in Korea first, which is normally how I do things. Because usually I design carefully before building something. And I guess this was also originally designed to be put on display in Ottawa, but even as like sort of this Canadian opportunity fell through and the Korean opportunity rose up, I never took the time to actually like fact check these assumptions that I was building on. And so I think there's something nice and humbling, again, and a reminder to like to stay humbled and curious, and to not make assumptions about other people and cultures and the way they work.
Well, actually, this isn't your last question, but off of that, I'm curious, like, what it's been like because you do work so globally. Like, what has that experience been like? Because you are kind of putting these things in like all different countries with all different types of cultures.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally just like a really curious person. So I love talking to people of different walks of life and learning how they do things, why they do things, and how it works. And so I personally love being able to like spend one day with like the poorest folks and then one day with the folks in suits. And I just think there's something really magical about being able to bridge these worlds together through, even without necessarily physically being there. I guess I feel more privileged and lucky to be able to do that than anything else.
Okay, let's get into your final question then. What do you see as the purpose or meaning of life?
I think the purpose and the meaning of life is to figure out how to become the best version of yourself in service of both yourself and the world, those around you. Yeah, big and small. Yeah, how do you become the best version of yourself? And to constantly pursue that.
I love that. Awesome. All right. Well, can you share how people can connect with you if they're interested? I know you've already shouted out Humble Badasses, but you
Yeah,
can do so again.
humblebadass.nyc, or you can just follow me on Von Wong across all channels, VonWong. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Benjamin, and getting a little peek inside of your mind.
My wonky brain.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.